Order. Angela Crawley to move the motion.
Thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered the potential merits of universal basic income. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, Ms McVeigh, and I would like to thank my honourable friend, the Honourable Member for Inverclyde, for his contributions in this place on universal basic income. There is no better time to reopen this discussion. We are up to our necks in the cost of living crisis, which is pushing households across this country further into poverty and destitution. We need change and we need it now. Chair, with respect, the Conservative Government have worked for over a decade to carefully craft a welfare system that renders recipients as deserving of their payments, but only if they meet the conditions attached. I appreciate that implementing the universal basic income and removing the conditional nature of welfare payments would not normally sit comfortably with this current government. However, it seems that the Conservative Party have had a change of heart. In fact, last Monday, the Treasury Select Committee, when questioned on the nature of universal energy bill discounts, which will see one-third of homes around £1,200 better off, the Chancellor said, there will be some people who don't need that help. That is unfortunately the consequence of having to do policy in practical terms. Having looked at all the options, we decided that it is the most effective way to reach a large number of people and help them where they need it. Clearly, this government has had a change of heart and are open to universal policies, dependent on who benefits it. So it seems that the biggest barrier to implementing a universal basic income is ideological. I urge the Minister to consider extending his party's new and compassionate approach to the benefit system and abandon the cruel and unforgiving system that depicts desperate people as undeserving. Now I want to come to some of the benefits of universal basic income. A universal basic income, as we have heard many times in this House and in the main chamber, would mean that every citizen would be provided with the subsistence of income. It would mean secure, regular payments into every individual's bank account without threat or disruption. In real terms, it would ensure that every person in this country is always able to afford food, is always able to keep a roof over their head, is always able to provide for their children, and is always able to meet a minimum standard of living. I will give way.
Giving way, and I think in principle the concept of universal basic income is a promising one. But just so I can understand, would by the definition she brings of universal basic income, would that be the only income someone would receive? Would they receive additional benefits if they were unemployed or if they had disabilities? And at what threshold would she think of considering setting that universal basic income?
I thank the Honourable Member for addressing that point. To be clear, we already have a system that recognises that individuals will need a tailored system that suits their needs. So those who have disabilities will need additional support. Those who need additional support for family requirements will have that support. So we have a system that already addresses that. So I don't feel that I need to replicate that when it already exists. The simple fact is, acknowledging that every single person has the right not to be destitute is a basic fundamental tenet. And I find it uncomfortable that anyone in this place would consider that a radical motivation. A recent study by the University of York found that the universal basic income would cut poverty by more than a half, bringing it up to the lowest level for 60 years. It would cut child poverty, pensioner poverty by more than a half, working age poverty by a quarter, and it would be a driver for economic equality. Further research has shown that it would stimulate local economic growth, and introducing a universal basic income would allow us to properly incentivise people into work and move away from the current focus on cruelly sanctioning those who are desperate. Instead of pushing people into precarious forms of employment and pretending that work programmes are actually working, a universal basic income would provide financial security. It would enable everyone to pursue employment that is most suitable for their lifestyles, hopes and ambitions, and it would allow everyone to engage in socially and personally productive activities like community or voluntary work, caregiving or entrepreneurial or creative activities. Chair, The Scottish Government has been exploring the feasibility of introducing a universal basic income, but it found that it was impossible under the devolved settlement. Now, with independence, the Scottish Government could be ambitious and could look to a future where we could ensure that every citizen in Scotland had the support that it needs. But instead, we don't have those powers yet, and without independence, we will not have them. Instead, it has commissioned research into a minimum income guarantee which would transform Scotland's fight against poverty. Instead of leaving those at the mercy of a universal credit sanctions, it would at least guarantee that they do not drop below the poverty line. One of the government's core contentions when this was last brought to the House was the expense of setting up such a system. However, the UK Government already has the technology to implement a minimum income guarantee. We already have the tapers in place for a universal credit system, which has markers to ensure that those who need additional funds will get them, to answer the Honourable Member's question. And universal credit was supposed to streamline and simplify the welfare system. Instead, it has led to this Government ploughing excessive funds and resources into anti-work programmes, processing sanctions and a target-driven job centre workforce unable to help those most at risk of poverty. If this Government wishes to cut 90,000 civil service staff and expects to keep this very complex welfare system running, it has another thing coming. Chair, I would therefore ask the Minister to read through the numerous studies that have shown that the benefits of introducing a universal basic income do work, and keep a close eye on the Scottish Government's work on the minimum income guarantee, and then explain how the flawed and damaging universal credit system is in any way an adequate system by comparison. This country is in crisis, and as the cost of living crisis continues, we cannot ignore the worsening mental health crisis. The two are most definitely linked, and introducing a universal basic income would help to alleviate both. There are innumerable studies which show the detrimental impact of welfare conditionality and the impact that it has on mental health for its recipients. I don't think anyone in here is in a position to argue with that. And a universal basic income pilot scheme conducted in Germany and Finland showed that reform of the welfare state directly impacts on the mental health of its recipients and the overall mental and physical well-being. The Mental Health Foundation has found that children who receive payments are less likely to abuse drugs and alcohol, are more likely to stay in education and have improved physical and mental health outcomes. The Finnish system showed that universal basic income helps improve cognitive functioning in adults, reduces their feelings of anxiety and depression, and generally increases the overall life satisfaction. A universal basic income is a holistic policy which will have holistic effects across a whole area of social policy. Studies have shown that introducing universal basic income, although expensive in the beginning, pays for itself over time through its far-reaching impacts. I will.
I'm very grateful to the Honourable Member for giving way, and can I congratulate her on both securing this debate and actually giving a very considered and clearly very well thought-out speech so far. Can she just clarify, just on that point about expense, though? I have seen estimates about the cost of this programme, if it was rolled out, even at a modest income, to be around £316 billion, one study put it at annually. So can she just clarify what her research has shown in terms of the overall cost on an annual basis?
Thank you. To be clear, as you will appreciate, there are no studies that are able to show comprehensively the over long-term benefits of such a scheme, because no pilot has been given any extensive research or possibility here in the UK or in most countries. But the fact remains, and I think we can all agree this, that where an individual is not reliant on thinking about how they will fund their next meal, how they will pay their electricity, how they will subsist and survive, then they can start to think about their life chances, their opportunities, the ways that they can begin to fulfil their ambitions in life. So I think it's simple to say that there is so much to be gained from a possible pilot, and that would give him the evidence and the studies and the statistics that he has asked for. The fact is, a universal and destigmatising, more compassionate welfare system would decrease depression and anxiety rates, and it's not overdramatic to say that it would save lives. I ask the Minister, if this Government is committed to addressing the mental health crisis, will they reform the system responsible for pushing so many people to the edge? The fact is, I would like to end my contribution by calling on this government to seriously consider the prospect of a universal basic income. I do not believe that such a policy to be radical or unattainable as it seems. We already have the technology and we already have a substantial Department of Work and Pensions budget able to cater to most of these concerns. But it is wasted on empty work programmes, on processing sanctions which scar people mentally and financially, and is leaving those most at risk of life in poverty abandoned. A universal basic income represents a fairer system, and I encourage the Minister to consider establishing a pilot scheme through his department and speak to the results rather than the rhetoric. I really think that the biggest issue we have here is cutting through the damaging Tory ideology that you have to work for your basic human rights. I urge the Minister to rethink his government's approach and to seriously consider a pilot of a universal basic income.
Question is that this House has considered the potential merits of a universal basic income. Now, I'm mindful that there will be a vote coming at about 5:10 and we want to get to the front bench at 10 past, no later than 10 past 5. So, if I call the first speaker, Beth Winter.
The actions of this government are really hammering working people and the working class and are driving more and more into poverty. People's incomes and living standards are under attack on many fronts, and we're facing the worst cost of living crisis in living memory. The government's imposed cut after cut to social security benefits and only increased benefits by a paltry 3.1% in April, when inflation now stands at 10%. And in terms of pay, we've seen freeze after freeze in public sector pay. And our key workers, whether care workers, local government workers or NHS workers, we've clapped for them through lockdown and they've not been rewarded. And at this moment in time, we have a debate going on in the chamber. RMT workers have been forced to go on strike action next week because, they are reasonable demands for pay and better terms and conditions are falling on deaf ears. And in terms of pensions, it's this Tory government who's broken the triple lock. This has had a devastating impact on far too many people. 14.5 million people are living in poverty. 4.3 million children across the UK are living in relative poverty, and that's 9 in every classroom with 30 children. And 10 million people are using food banks. We really should be angry that we, the fifth richest nation on this planet, have allowed this situation to arise and become normalised. And it really is a political choice. And there are alternatives. Universal basic income is one of those. We've got to do everything we can to achieve a fairer and more resilient society as we come out of the pandemic. And a vital part of that would be to replace our dysfunctional benefit system with one that provides financial security for everyone. UBI, which is an unconditional and regular cash payment to everybody, regardless of their income, is gaining significant traction as a solution to many of these issues. And it's underpinned by the principle of universality, which I endorsed, to provide everyone with enough to cover the basic cost of living and financial security. It's a basic human right. And it's got lots of merits. It meets the human right that everybody should have an appropriate amount of money to live on. It overcomes the negative features of means testing, particularly the stigma associated with claiming social security benefits. It is simple, unlike the complex current welfare system, and it will stimulate demand in the economy by putting money in people's pockets. And I am particularly proud of the campaign in Wales, my country of Wales, on universal basic income, a campaign led by a gentleman called Jonathan Williams, UBI Lab Wales. And it's been a grassroots, bottom-up campaign. It's been very effective and successful in getting local CLPs, local authorities, to sign pledges on behalf of, in support of, universal basic income. Also assembly members and participating in various groups here in Parliament. Yes, I will, yeah.
I'm very grateful to her, and I apologise for my late arrival at this debate. I was detained elsewhere. I'm sure she welcomes, as I do, the small-scale pilot scheme being run by the Welsh Government, which will be targeting money to 250 care leavers. They are a particularly vulnerable group, and I look forward to that, to the results of that pilot. However, it will take 3 years, and I'm sure she'd agree we need something a larger scale, really, and very quickly.
Yes, I fully agree, and thank you for that intervention. I'm just going to come on to the pilot scheme, the Universal Basic Income pilot scheme that Welsh Government are introducing in the next few weeks, I understand. Mark Drakeford, the First Minister of Wales, is a big, strong proponent of universal basic income. It is part of the radical and more progressive policies being pursued by Welsh Government, particularly in comparison to the UK Government. And it forms part of a cooperation agreement between the Labour Party and Plaid Cymru, which I fully support as well. And as my honourable friend has already said, it is a pilot, and it is as ambitious as Welsh Government can expect to be able to achieve within the financial constraints that it has placed upon it by UK Government, because obviously the financial settlement by the Barnett Fowler, and from what I understand, despite attempts by Welsh Government to discuss the potential for assistance from UK Government, that fell on deaf ears as well. So I very much welcome the pilot. It's with care leavers. It's an amount of £1,600 per month for care leavers. This is an amount that is significantly higher than any other basic income pilot globally, and is broadly equivalent to the real living wage. And there's a comprehensive methodology associated with this, and a very robust evaluation process coming out of it. Michael Marmot is one of the advisors, Guy Standing, who's world-renowned on UBI. They've got a technical advisory panel. So it's a very well thought-out process, and it goes as far as it can. Yes, it's got some limitations, even I would admit, but it is really trying to look at more progressive, radical, alternative ways of supporting people. But for me, and I will conclude on this must form, any pilot of UBI or a rollout must form part of a much broader transformative agenda. We need a benefit system that ensures everyone has equal access to a safety net and adequate to meet their needs, along with a progressive tax system. So I propose the reinstatement of the £20 UC uplift, inflation-proof benefits, wages and benefits. I'm a proponent of the wealth tax. UBI must form a part of the more transformative agenda that is required. And I will continue to work alongside colleagues, both in Parliament, but crucially outside of this bubble of Parliament, Anti-Poverty Alliance Wales, Child Poverty Action Group, trade unions, and in particular Unite Wales Community Union, to promote for myself radical, alternative, socialist policies. But for now, I really do want to take the opportunity to celebrate and congratulate Welsh Government on the ambitious pilot that is going to be taking place. Diolch yn fawr.
Gareth Davis.
It's a great pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and let me congratulate again the honourable member and actually everybody for being here, because I welcome any debate to talk about moving our economy forward and helping the most vulnerable in society. But I'm afraid may come as a complete shock, I'm not sure, but I disagree with this particular proposal, and I just want to set out very briefly 4 reasons why, if I may, in good humour and constructively. The first point, Madam Chair, is the fact that there is a great deal of uncertainty as to how much this would cost taxpayers and the British Exchequer. Universal means everybody. So that means in our country, over 65 million people will receive some form of income under universal basic income as a policy. And if this was set at a level to provide just a basic income, even a modest income, that would result in literally hundreds of billions of pounds of extra money being spent by the taxpayer. That means that we have to find that money either from other departments or to raise new money through higher taxes. And that is a perfectly noble argument to make, but it is a fact of running a budget that you either have to take the money from somewhere else or you have to raise the money. And I'm not sure what the argument of the Welsh Government or the Liberal Democrats is, but I'm happy to hear it.
For giving way, and I would also like to apologise for being a little late. I was caught unawares by the broken lifts in PCH.
Another one.
Would the honourable member accept, though, that universal basic income at the moment is still a concept, an idea, and that those of us who already earn much more than what a universal basic income might offer should perhaps not be looking for any payment at all, but should accept that we already have that income, and that therefore to calculate giving it to everybody might be in line with the actual wording, but not the spirit of what a universal basic income would be?
Well, look, it's beyond the bounds of my intellect to be able to argue today what universal means. I take universal to mean everybody and being universally accepted and universally received by everyone. And I think it would be up to perhaps people to give it back, but as we've seen in recent policies, that's not always happened. Of course, I'll give way to the honourable member from Wales.
I'm very grateful. I don't want to be argumentative, but of course the Chancellor has agreed to give us all, everyone here, the princely sum of £400.
Yes.
So the principle is accepted on his side of the House, though I agree that there might be rather larger sums involved. However, there's one other point I'd like to make. That would be the gross cost. But in terms of well-being and of better health and happiness and everything else that comes along with having a proper income, there might be netted off a considerable amount of money.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the intervention. Look, somebody else, you've made, I think my honourable friend here who's brought the debate today made the point that the Conservatives have just recently, in fact, implemented a universal policy. She'll be aware, and so will the honourable gentleman, that in times of crisis, whether it's a pandemic, first pandemic in over 100 years, or a national crisis when it comes to energy prices, you would expect the government to protect as many people as possible, but act at pace and in exceptional circumstances. So I accept the point, but that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is a complete root and branch reform of our welfare system that is permanent, as I understand it. I'm going to make some progress, if that's all right, because I'm sure you'll disagree with other points that I make along the way. But that was my first point is cost. The second is the fact that I believe that this will potentially exacerbate, not alleviate, inequality. And the reason I say that is because under a universal system, everybody will receive it. Millionaires will receive a cheque through the post. Even an RMT driver on £70,000 a year will receive a cheque under this system. But I do accept one point, and I would like the Minister to address this in his remarks. There is a point here about simplification of our benefit system, and I do take that point after dealing with hundreds of cases in my own constituency that a lot of the time people are not aware of all the many benefits that are available to them as vulnerable members of society, and any effort the Minister can make to help inform and simplify our benefit system, I would absolutely endorse that. But as I said, because it will exacerbate inequality and give billionaires and millionaires a cheque through the post that they don't need, I can't accept this policy suggestion. Of course I will.
Thank you very much for giving way. If you listen to what I said that this has to be part of a transformative agenda more generally. And a wealth tax, I was here speaking yesterday in a debate on wealth tax, would raise, according to the Wealth Tax Foundation, Commission, £260 billion. Would you agree that that is a good way of raising funding?
It will shock her even further to hear that I don't agree. And the reason I don't, and we're getting off a little bit off course right now, as relates to a wealth tax, we do have a lot of people who invest in our country. We have a lot of people who start from nothing and go on to achieve great things. And I don't want to dissuade, I don't want to hamper their ambition to have a better life, to set up a business, to employ lots of people. And I believe that a wealth tax would not only put off people from investing and coming to this country, it would actually dissuade people like my dad, for example, who's not a particularly rich man, but he did set up a business because he wanted to do better for himself and his family, and as a result ended up employing a lot of people. But, that is not the way forward, in my view. Economic growth and the dignity of work is the way to go, and to incentivise that. And that's my third point. The dignity of work and the security of a regular paycheck has been proven and shown time and time again to be the best way out of poverty for people. People in work, though, don't just get an income. They get so much more. They get friends. Sometimes they meet their wives. They get meaning in life and a purpose. The dignity of work gives people things to get up for in the morning. The work environment and the people that we work with add so much to our lives. But jobs, I will in a minute, but jobs also give us skills that develop over time. And if we introduce a universal basic income, I'm afraid I disagree with my friends from the SNP, that it will actually dissuade people from going to work. It won't encourage work in the way that they've said. Of course I will, yes.
There's absolutely no evidence from any pilot programme run anywhere in the world that says that people are indolent and they don't want to work. In fact, the current welfare system punishes people for going back to work. And the basic income, I'm not taking your basic income away if you go get some part-time work. If you go back to university, if you take on studies. So it actually encourages people to have the confidence to go back into work.
He makes a reasonable point about evidence, but I would also point to him the fact that there is no evidence for universal basic income working anywhere in the world. The Honourable Lady, I know I can preempt it. The Honourable Lady rattled off a number of examples, and I will hurry up my speech because I'm getting asked to move on, but I have taken a number of interventions, hopefully that's acknowledged. There have been a number of studies and pilots, not least in Wales, that's going on at the moment, but not one has been executed on. Not one example around the world can we point to where this has been implemented. And the reason is, while it may show some benefits on mental health, well, it may show some benefits on well-being and other points, it has not shown any government around the world that this is the right model for alleviating poverty and moving forward. And I'm afraid I'm going to end my speech here by saying thank you to you, Madam Chair, and thanks to everybody for listening. I feel a little alone on these sides, but I'm pretty sure the British people are with me. Thank you.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and it's a pleasure to serve here today. We're living in unprecedented times, and I'm loath to say that because every time I've said that in the past 2 years, things have got worse. But we are living in unprecedented times. And the problems we face now are ones which demand very different, I believe, and potentially more far-reaching solutions than anything the country has experienced perhaps since the end of the Second World War, or perhaps that there's any evidence of anywhere else in the world, and we might need to be first. Now, now more than ever, we are seeing clearly how easily any of us could find ourselves needing support. There's a generation out there who had no concept that they might ever need benefits because they had good, well-paid jobs. But they are seeing that now is no security. Food banks in my constituency in Edinburgh West are telling me that the people who used to bring donations to the food banks are now coming for help. So it can happen to any of us that we would need support and perhaps find none. And sadly, we are learning that the welfare state, which has served us so well for 7 decades, is not fully equipped for the new reality that is the consequences of the series of crises we've faced for the past 2 years. During COVID, I spoke to too many people for whom the many government schemes offering furlough, business grants, support for the self-employed simply did not provide support. Coronavirus made no exception in who it attacked, and yet the government was unable to say the same about who it supported. And yes, we've heard examples today of payments that are now being made to everybody, but the government repeatedly tells us that they can't help everyone all the time. I don't think that's good enough. But I do recognise that what we are facing now is a mammoth task. But we have to find a way. We cannot lose sight of the question so many people face this coming winter of how will they feed their family, keep a roof above their heads, and stay warm. When even the welfare state, which generations in this country have worked hard to maintain, is not able to do that, we have to accept that the time has come, perhaps, to do it differently. What has been abundantly clear is that what has been missing throughout all these crises has been a crucial element of universal protection, something perhaps none of us realised that we would need. And the honourable member who spoke earlier mentioned the fact that said it doesn't exist anywhere in the world and how could we do it? Well, in 1942, Beveridge's vision didn't exist. But it is undoubtedly one of those iconic British institutions of which we are all rightly proud. System, perhaps, rather than institution. And because that generation took the risk, we benefited. Now, perhaps, it's for us to take the risk so that future generations can benefit and realise that we need a new vision to equip us for the 21st century and the very different challenges which it's bringing. Now, the concept of a universal basic income, or perhaps a guaranteed basic income, or a universal right to a standard of living that looks at the country and says, everybody needs to be able to be sure that they will have food on their table, a roof over their heads, and some warmth in the winter, is really what we're talking about. We're talking about a principle. We're not necessarily talking about sending everybody cheques every month, millionaires getting cheques. No, we're talking about looking at people and seeing if their standard of living, if their income, if their quality of life reaches a basic level. That is what we're talking about today. And as a constituency MP, with every passing day, every desperate phone call from someone financially, somebody in trouble, frantically searching for a financial lifeboat, which doesn't exist, I become more convinced that some form of universal basic income has to be the solution in this country. Nobody should be left behind. And I believe that moving forward after this pandemic, after the cost of living crisis, unemployment, financial insecurity, will be major challenges for any government, and that a basic income, a basic standard of living, a guaranteed income will be the best, fairest and simplest way to safeguard the most vulnerable in society and care for those who need it. At the time...
I'm very grateful to her. Given that we're talking in very high terms, with a breadth of vision here, I think, apropos what the Honourable Gentleman was saying about the dignity of work, we must crack this paradox that it is said that in order to get the poor to work harder, we must provide them with less support. And in order to get the rich to work harder, we must provide them with other support, that is, to cut their taxes. I think we need a much more universal view of supports of income and of dignity for everyone.
Thank you very much.
Order. The sitting is resumed and the debate may now continue until 5:55. Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. On resumption, can I just say I agree wholeheartedly with the Honourable Member's comments, which are very welcome. And I would simply wind up by saying that in the current circumstances, with the series of crises, with the cost of living emergency which we're now facing, we must find a way to free people from the insecurity and anxiety that they face so often today. And if that means we have to try more than one way of providing and ensuring a universal basic income or guaranteed standard of living or whatever we want to call it, then we have to do that, because we simply have to find a way and ensure that this generation does not let down future ones. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I say at the very outset, I'm very, very pleased that the Honourable Lady for Lanark and Hamilton East has brought this forward. And I fully support what the Honourable Lady is trying to achieve. The Honourable Lady for Edinburgh West, was speaking beforehand, and there was everything in the Honourable Lady's comments would support my thoughts as well. I can say how pleased I am to see the gentleman for Gratham and Stamford in place. We don't say this very respectively now. In many cases, Madam Chair, we don't always have someone who would have a different opinion from what we're putting forward here. So, with great respect, I'm very much I'm pleased to see him in this place and for arguing his point or debating his point, which is right to do. I have to say that I probably don't agree with very much of it, but that's not the point. The point is the honourable gentleman had the courage to come here and say that, and I admire that. I admire that in anybody, and I admire that in the honourable gentleman as well. I'm also very pleased to see the Minister in this place, because I know the Minister always very compassionately, very respectably to us all will put forward his point of view. We would hope that, that maybe the Minister might agree with us. We'll wait to see whether that's possible or not, but anyway, we'll make our points. I've highlighted this House numerous times over the last few weeks. I have real concerns for the working poor. It's maybe because, Madam Chair, and I'm not saying this for any other reason than it's factual. And when I was a young boy growing up, we didn't have very much, and I think we didn't have any much in goods, much in toys and stuff, but we always had plenty of love in the house from our parents. The reason why I say that is because maybe that gives you a perspective for those who don't have much today, and that's the reason why I come here to speak and support the Honourable Lady for what she puts forward. People who this time last year were working hard and barely making ends meet, the increases are meaning difficult choices. So poverty is staring them straight into their eyes. No school excursions. Just give an example. Explain to your 7-year-old why the school trip to the local aquarium isn't accessible, and they have to wait with another class while everyone else's parents can pay the £11 to go. How do you get across to that the school only informed you mid-month and you were expected to pay it within a week, and that mummy literally doesn't have a spare pound until child benefit comes round, and that the money usually goes for the electric top-up, as it does today more than ever? Does this sound far-fetched to some? I can assure you it happened in my office just last week. In a school, and my staff member stepped in to pay that amount for this parent who was in for a food voucher, breaking their hearts, spilled out their story. The three honourable ladies who spoke reiterated the issues for the food banks and how important it is. They hated asking for the food voucher, but they were desperate. And that, Madam Chair, is life in this great United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland today. And that's what we're faced. And that's why this is coming forward. This is not to score points, Madam Chair. This is to speak up for those people who we have to speak up for. That's what I'm here for. I know what everybody else is here for. Yes, the trip for that school was not essential for the 7-year-old. To the mummy who works in the local shop and whose partner also works, it is their life at present and will be their life until we in this place reduce the cost of fuel and electric and uplift the cap. I want to see the cap uplifted. I don't want to, it's not about millionaires getting money. It's about the poverty poor, the working poor. It's about them, and that's what I see this as. This year they simply can't do it, and this is only going to get worse. We can give the food voucher. We can point to the wonderful local charities who help parents in need. But the fact is that we in this place must address the working poor who are working full-time and who can still not make ends meet. And that's a reality in my constituency, and I believe in many other constituencies, indeed maybe even yourself, Madam Chair, as well. This is why I do believe that we need to consider a universal basic income and why the burden cannot fall simply on small business owners and demand an increase in wages, because sometimes that's not possible as well. Businesses are on the brink, and this could tip them over. One small business owner, just to give a very quick example, told me he used to be able to buy, an example was a toilet roll for 80p that he sold for £1. Because of all the price of shipping that's went up by £9,500 per container, he can't even buy that for £1 anymore. He now buys it to sell at £1.29, a 29% increase. If we tell him he has to top up the wages of the staff again, it will be a £1.50 for the product, and the prices continue to increase. So it's about viability, it's about sustainability for the businesses. When government treated the universal credit system, it was with the idea that it would give flexibility to working people to ensure that they have enough money. For example, £20,000 a year for a couple without government assistance may have been enough last year, but it certainly is enough this year. Minister, I make this very respectfully and with a real plea from myself and indeed, can I say, from all of us in this corner and the shadow minister as well. I plead on behalf of the working families in poverty. Go back to the Cabinet, go back to the Treasury, uplift the cap and get hard-working people who want to work, hard-working people like my constituent, the help that they need to survive. And that is what I am talking about, surviving. It's not getting a passport to take a much-needed holiday. It's not saving for a TV or a new sofa. It is indeed, instead, to feed their child and allow them to go on school educational trips instead of being left with another class, feeling left out, embarrassed and ostracised. And that is why this is not okay. So I asked the Minister, I asked my government, and my Minister, who I have a great affection for, and he knows that. He and I speak in many, many things, and there's not a whole lot of things that, from human rights point of view, from persecution point of view, that we don't agree on, and we're on the same side. But this is not okay, Minister, and this House has the ability to make changes. I just ask, let's make them, please.
We now move to the front bench. Ronnie Cohen, SNP spokesperson.
Thank you very much, Ms McVeigh, and I congratulate my honourable friend and colleague from Lanark and Hamilton East for bringing forward this debate. Basic income and the phrase "an idea whose time has come" seems to go hand in glove these days. It's been around for a long time, and recently, thanks to Guy Standing, it's been linked with the Magna Carta, or to be more precise, the Charter of the Forests. So that makes it at least 800 years old. There's a growing body of thought that is engaging with the concept of a common good, a common weal, a common wealth. Our current welfare system is failing. It's abused and misused, which is a great pity. And I also, along with the member for Edinburgh West, will invoke the spirit of William Beveridge. In December 1942, when considering establishing a welfare state, William Beveridge released a report in which he wrote, "A revolutionary moment in the world's history is a time for revolutions, not for patching." The welfare system he established was once the cornerstone of a brave new Britain, but sadly it has fallen into disrepair. Once again, we're looking at a time for revolutions. And may I say to this Conservative and Unionist government, not just in welfare, but in transport, in heating, in energy, in employment and constitution. Will basic income cost a lot to implement and run? You bet it will. It will cost a shed load of money. But is it cost effective? I could argue until I'm blue in the face that once we consider the cost of the existing system, the health benefits of basic income, both physical and mental, the increase in start-up businesses, the greater take-up in further education, the freedom it gives to people to live a life well spent, that is more than cost-effective. It is a must if we are to raise people out of financial poverty and poverty of aspiration. What price do you put on releasing children from crushing poverty that they currently experience? What price for hope, aspiration and ambition? As was mentioned earlier on, the honourable member from Grantham and Stamford, who I also welcome this debate, it puts a pleasure into debating when people come and put their side of the argument in such a manner, such a well-informed and mannered fashion. But this tax system is for everybody. You adjust the tax system accordingly. If I'm getting £12,000 extra through basic income and earning an MP's salary, I will pay back that £12,000. It nets off. Or we can use sovereign money, or we can use a Citizens' Wealth Fund. It doesn't have to be top-side down. Basic income does not make people indolent. Every pilot we've had across the world shows that it frees people up to go out and work without being financially penalised. And do we know everything about how it will work? Well, no, we don't. But I'm not asking the UK government to take a punt on this. I'm asking them to consider the evidence, and that is why they should embrace the opportunity of pilot projects. Projects designed to investigate and identify the pros and cons of basic income. I am pleased that in Scotland, backed by the Scottish Government, provided £250,000 over 2 years to support the undertaking of a feasibility study for a CBI pilot, that we are planning 4 pilot projects: Fife, North Ayrshire, Glasgow and Edinburgh. But I'm equally delighted that there are similar projects in Wales, Northern Ireland and England. 32 motions passed by local councils calling for UBI trials. These projects would provide substantial data for academic research that we can learn from and form future policy. But they need the support, both financial and administrative, of the UK government. All I'm asking is that the government makes policy based on evidence and stops hiding its head in the sand. I led the first ever debate in this Parliament on basic income on the 14th of September 2016. Sadly, the UK government is no further forward, and we're now experiencing increased poverty and an increasing gap between the richest and poorest in society. The status quo is unacceptable. Basic income represents something better. It represents hope and opportunity. It is a platform to build on a safety net it's a platform to build on and a safety net if required. Chair, I shall entry as I ended in 2016 with a quote from Noam Chomsky, who said, "Optimism is a strategy for making a better future. Because unless you believe that the future can be better, you're unlikely to step up and take responsibility for making it so." Once again, I'm asking the UK Government to take responsibility.
Alison McGovern.
Thank you, Chair. It is a pleasure to serve under your chairship, and I would like to congratulate the Honourable Lady for Lanark and Hamilton East for having this debate, which I think has been a good debate, if slightly interrupted. Her argument, I think, was a very good argument against financial insecurity. It is very stressful to tackle poverty. A family that doesn't have enough will almost certainly experience significant mental health challenges and will not lead the kind of life in our country that we would wish for them. She also made a good argument, I think, about what's gone wrong with the Department for Work and Pensions since 2010. I think there are numerous examples where the actions of government has caused stress and pressures in life that simply did not need to be there. And I think all members, Chair, have made contributions that have argued against poverty and a universalist approach for a UK as a country where no one is left behind. And I think that's where we agree. But I was not clear what the member was arguing for. And she mentioned several times that it's not possible to give full details, and that's why UK government should do more research, or that somehow we need to progress this, and then there might be information about what might be available under a universal basic income. But, Chair, I think that there does need to be some simple facts in order to make the case for such a radical change to our system. And those facts are how much the universal income might be and how it would be paid for. I will give way.
The members are aware that Andy Burnham in Greater Manchester is pushing for a basic income to be trialled in the Greater Manchester area. And he seems to understand that by trialling these things and learning from them, we'll all be better informed.
Thank you, Chair. And I'll go on to say why universal basic income is not the Labour Party's policy. These basic facts, I think, are important. The Honourable Lady, I think, could tell us more about the situation in Scotland. She mentioned the experience of the Scottish government, and I think she could make her argument giving some more basic facts. So it's difficult to see exactly what it is that she wants the change in system to do when we don't have the information about what it is exactly that's being proposed. Now, she mentioned supporting the idea of a minimum income guarantee, and several members have mentioned that. But that's not the same as a universal basic income, because a minimum income guarantee is about a standard below which no one should fall, whereas a universal basic income, as I think I understand it from her, is about a universal payment for everybody, regardless of circumstances. So I think we need to think about this from first principles. Our social security system, Chair, has two purposes, as I understand it. Firstly, to smooth incomes over a person's lifetime. And this is where we have universal aspects to our system that we all agree with. I mean, we all agree with the idea of the state pension being universal on the basis of age. There's other aspects of our social security system, for example, child benefit, that are paid on the basis that children have limited possibilities to generate income. In fact, you know, we absolutely think that children ought to be supported. I mean, we could have a long debate about the two-child policy and the fact that that rather contravenes that principle. But that smoothing of income over lifetime, Chair, is exactly as Beveridge envisaged the system would work. I will just finish this point and then I will give way to her. And the second point of our social security system as it works is to address needs that people have in order to enable their full participation in society. So those who have extra costs, the obvious example being where people have a disability. Yeah.
The Honourable Member for giving way, and she's made very clear that the Labour Party do not support universal basic income, which is profoundly fascinating to me as a Labour Party. But not that. She mentioned quite clearly that she felt the benefit system had started to change since 2010. Where have the lessons been learned for the Labour Party, which had a far less than perfect system in and of itself? And what exactly is she proposing that she is for to ensure that those living on the lowest incomes can make the basic subsistence that are required?
Thank you, Chair, and I will come to that point because I want to set out what I think is the important way in which we should take our country forward. So I'll set that out shortly, if I may. I will.
Just a reminder possibly that there are three particular principles of social security and of the support that we give to each other, one being income replacement, the other being addressing particular needs such as child care or whatever it is. But the third one, and the one that is important for us at this end of the chamber, is the need to promote solidarity, cohesion, using the system to ensure that we all realise that we are all in this together, as it were. And in that sense, the system should be generous and much more generous than it actually is at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the Honourable Gentleman makes a very important point, which is about the universality of the system that we all pay into and we all take out of when we need. That's the contributory principle, that we all are part of the same system. And this is where I think that there is a very important point that is at risk of being missed. Because the contributory principle, that idea that we're all a part of it, is failed when people are left behind. And Beveridge and Eleanor Rathbone, whose history you know well, Chair, created the system of social security not in isolation from their other work that they did, analysing the problems that had happened in the 1930s and assessing the institutions that were needed for a good economy that would leave no one behind, where people could pay into the social security system where they were able to through working and take out of it when they needed. And their point was to make sure that work would help support families and that the social security system would be there to provide a minimum level of income as needed to support a family. The Beveridge report required two other things to be in existence to support the system of social security. And the first one was the creation of the NHS. And the second one was the assumption of full employment, a labour market where everybody could take part and where work would provide enough to help support a family. And as various members have said already, this is what is going wrong right now. The Prime Minister crows about jobs, but in the middle of a crisis where we've got huge price rises, wages are falling. And that, to me, is the definition of a broken jobs market. I give way to
for giving way. As you probably, well, I'm sure you are aware, prior to the 2019 manifesto, the then Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell commissioned Guy Standing to undertake a research project on a pilot of basic income, and the document, I'm sure I expect you would have read that, proposing a UBI pilot. And that was included in the 2019 manifesto about piloting UBI. Is that something that we now support? Or continue to support, sorry?
I'm going to set out the rest of my argument about what I think we should do to help improve people's incomes. Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will do it very quickly. People have mentioned the various bits of research, and they are important and tell us about how people respond to different systems. But I think that this broken jobs market that we face now, where businesses are crying out for staff, there's vacancies left, right and centre, but too many people are stuck in work that is far too low paid, shows exactly what's going wrong. And the problem with what the member for Grantham and Stamford said about work having been proven to be the best route out of poverty is that for the past decade, the Tory government has set out on a mission to now prove that that is not the case. What we need is a social security system that does what it was designed to do, help people through different life stages when they need it, and help lift those out of disadvantage and into the dignity of work. There will always be people who are unable to work, but for the vast majority of people, they want to be in work. And it's not obvious to me that there's a proposal on the table that does either of those things. Labour's approach will be different. We need to change job centres. My apologies. We need to change job centres to help people move on and move up in work and progress our country to real full employment that involves disabled people and everybody in our country. That would be a plan towards progress. My apologies, Chair.
Minister, and mindful of the wind-up, we do need to give a minute to the member who's brought this debate to the House.
One of Cheshire's finest. It's an honour to serve with you in the chair, and I'm very mindful of the time that's available, and I'm sure you'll give me a reminder as we go. It's an honour to be involved in this debate, and I know there are sincerely held views by all members in the House. It's also pretty clear that there's still quite a lot of debate about this subject, even within the opposition parties. So I look forward to seeing how that debate moves forward. As members are aware, our welfare system is centred around the support provided by Universal Credit, which offers a streamlined and simplified benefit system that supports those on low incomes, as well as those who are unemployed or who cannot work. Universal Credit is a dynamic benefit that reflects people's needs from month to month. It ensures that claimants are paid depending on their circumstances, with claimants' awards changing depending on how much they earn from month to month. And that is in strong contrast to a universal basic income, which does not fluctuate based on earnings in the same way. And it mandates a standard monthly allowance paid to all working age adults, although I'm mindful that there are still details to be worked through in the proposals from the Scottish Government. And I just want to reassure colleagues in the chamber today, not least of which the Honourable Member for Lanark and Hamilton East, who was successful in securing this debate, and I congratulate her for doing it, but also the Honourable Member, my friend from Strangford and also Edinburgh West and so forth, that my views, and indeed the views of my colleague from Grantham and Stamford, they're not ideologically held views. These are concerns based on practical issues, as we've heard through the debate that's taken place, particularly over the last 10 or 15 minutes or so, that need to be properly worked through. We have real concerns around UBI on a practical basis, evidence-based concerns, because of the way in which it doesn't provide the work incentive that we believe is vital in these sorts of systems. We have fundamental concerns as well about what this might mean in terms of targeting as well, because the approach to many of the UBI schemes that have been put into place are not targeted at those with greatest need. And we feel that it's absolutely vital to make sure that there are targeted approaches put in place, particularly as we noticed from the Chancellor on the 26th of May, I think it was, when he set out our targeted measures to help those who need support through cost of living challenges, whether it's those on means-tested benefits, those on disability benefits, or those pensioners as well. So, and that legislation, by the way, is coming to the House next week. So we have fundamental concerns that are not just held by the government, but held by many think tanks, held by the Work and Pensions Select Committee back in 2020, and also concerns that are based on evidence from trials that have taken place in different parts of the world, whether it's in Spain or Canada, or particularly in Finland, where the Finnish finance minister came to the conclusion that the case was closed, there must be conditionality, in the social security system. And it's for these reasons that we have concerns about the UBI approach, whether it's that being put forward initially by the Scottish Government or by the Welsh Government's planned pilot. And I look forward to being a fly on the wall in the discussions between the opposition front bench and the Welsh Government on these matters. Thank you.
Angela Crawley.
Thank you, Chair, and I thank each of the honourable members for contributing today. The simple fact is I would direct the honourable member to the question of where the detail is and where the facts are. The Scottish study fully costed 2 feasibility studies of a model that is workable, but the simple fact is for too many families, this winter will be the hardest yet. For too many families, children will continue to grow up in poverty. Now, I don't think UBI is a radical concept, and I think this government, with the greatest of respects, needs some radical ideas and new vision if the Queen's speech is anything to go by. So I urge the Minister to seriously consider a pilot of this scheme and give families a chance.
Order, order. The sitting stands adjourned.